The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in late September of 1876, and Tessa Fairmont knew, before opening it, that her life was about to change forever. She stood on the porch of her family's modest home just outside Challis, Idaho, holding the cream-colored envelope with trembling fingers while the autumn wind tugged at her dark blonde hair. Inside, her father was dying. Outside, the letter confirmed what had been arranged months ago. In 3 weeks, she would marry Douglas Hartwell, a silver mine owner from Virginia City she had met exactly twice in her entire life. Tessa was 21 years old and had never imagined her life would come to this. Her father's illness had drained what little savings they had, and her mother had died 2 years prior in childbirth, along with what would have been Tessa's baby brother. When Douglas Hartwell had visited Challis on business and expressed interest in finding a suitable wife, Tessa's father had seen it as providence. A dying man's last wish was to see his daughter cared for, even if it meant selling her future to a stranger. She tucked the letter into her apron pocket and went back inside, where her father lay in the bedroom that smelled of camphor and approaching death. Samuel Fairmont had once been a robust man who worked hard at the general store in town, but consumption had whittled him down to bones and shallow breathing. His eyes, once bright blue like Tessa's, had faded to a watery gray. "The wedding date is confirmed," Tessa said quietly, settling into the chair beside his bed. "October 20th. Her father reached for her hand with fingers that felt like dried twigs. "You are a good daughter, Tessa, better than I deserve. Douglas will provide for you. He has money, position. You will want for nothing. Except love," Tessa thought but did not say. "Except choice. Except a life that feels like my own." 3 days later, Zachary Xander rode into Challis covered in trail dust, his dark hair longer than it had been when he left, his jaw shadowed with stubble. He was 24 years old and had spent the last year and a half building a cattle ranch 90 miles southeast, carving a life out of raw land with nothing but determination and the small inheritance his grandfather had left him. The work had been backbreaking, lonely, and all-consuming. But now the ranch had a solid house, sturdy fences, and a growing herd. Now he finally had something to offer the woman who had occupied his thoughts every single day since he had left. Zachary had grown up in Challis, the son of a blacksmith who drank too much and a mother who had left when he was 10. He had worked odd jobs throughout his youth, saved every penny, and dreamed of owning land. He had also loved Tessa Fairmont since they were both 15 years old, though he had never possessed the courage or the means to tell her properly. They had been friends, good friends who talked easily and laughed often. But Zachary had always felt the weight of his poverty between them like an invisible wall. When his grandfather died and left him $500, Zachary had seen his chance. He could buy land, build something real, and finally be worthy of a woman like Tessa. He had told her he was leaving, promising to return when he had something to offer. She had smiled sadly and wished him well, and he had ridden away believing she would wait. Now he tied his horse outside the general store and asked the first person he saw about the Fairmont family. The shopkeeper, old Mrs. Peterson, looked at him with something like pity. "You have been gone a long while, Zachary Xander," she said. "Things have changed. Samuel Fairmont is dying, and Tessa is to be married in a fortnight to a wealthy man from Virginia City. It was all arranged months ago." The words hit Zachary like a physical blow. He stood frozen in the middle of the store, the smell of coffee and leather and pickled goods suddenly overwhelming. "Married," he repeated. "Tessa is getting married to Douglas Hartwell. He owns silver mines, very wealthy they say. It will be a good match for her, especially with her father so ill. She will be cared for." Mrs. Peterson's expression softened. "I am sorry, Zachary. I know you two were close once." Zachary walked out of the store in a daze. The main street of Challies looked exactly as it had when he left, the same false-fronted buildings, the same mountains rising in the distance, but everything felt different now. He had spent 18 months breaking his back to build a future, and Tessa was promised to another man. His first impulse was to ride straight to her house, but he forced himself to think. Barging in would accomplish nothing if she was already committed. Instead, he took a room at the boarding house, cleaned himself up, and waited until evening when he knew her father would be resting. Then he rode out to the Fairmont place, his heart hammering against his ribs. Tessa was in the garden pulling up the last of the summer vegetables when she heard the horse approach. She straightened, one hand shading her eyes against the setting sun, and froze when she recognized the rider. For a moment she thought she must be seeing things, a trick of light and wishful thinking, but then Zachary dismounted and started walking toward her, and she knew he was real. "Zachary," she whispered, then louder. "Zachary!" He stopped a few feet away, drinking in the sight of her. She wore a simple calico dress and an apron, her hair tied back with a ribbon, dirt on her hands from the garden. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "I came back," he said, his voice rough. "I built the ranch, Tessa. I have a house, cattle, good land with water. I came back for you." Tessa's eyes filled with tears. "You should not have come. Mrs. Peterson told me about the wedding. Tell me it is not true. Tell me you are not promised to someone else." She looked down at her hands, at the dirt under her fingernails and the two thin gold bands that had been her mother's. "It is true. I am to marry Douglas Hartwell in 2 weeks. The arrangements are made. Do you love him?" The question came out more forcefully than Zachary intended, almost a demand. "I barely know him." Tessa's voice broke. "But my father is dying, Zachary, dying. The medical bills, the costs, everything we had is gone. Douglas can provide security. My father's last wish is to see me settled before he passes. I cannot deny him that peace." Zachary stepped closer, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. "What about what you want?" "Does that matter at all?" Tessa laughed, a bitter sound. "What I want? When did what I want ever matter? I am a woman alone with a dying father and no prospects. Douglas Hartwell is a good match. He is respectable. He will give me a comfortable life. Many women would be grateful for such an opportunity. But you do not love him. Love is a luxury I cannot afford." She met his eyes finally, and Zachary saw the pain there, the resignation. "You left, Zachary. You rode away 18 months ago to build your dream. I am happy for you, truly. But I cannot wait for dreams anymore. I have to live in the real world where my father is dying and bills need to be paid and security matters more than girlish fantasies." The words stung because they were fair. He had left. He had spent 18 months focused entirely on building the ranch, barely sending word, assuming she would somehow know he was coming back for her. He had taken her for granted. "I was building a future for us," he said quietly. "Every fence post I drove into the ground, every calf born, every board nailed into place, I was thinking of you. I was thinking of the life we could have together. I should have written more. I should have explained. But I am here now and I am telling you that I love you. I have loved you since we were 15 years old. I have always loved you." Tessa's tears spilled over then, tracking through the dust on her cheeks. "Do not do this. Please, Zachary, do not make this harder than it already is. Come with me. Right now. We could ride to the ranch tonight. I will take care of you. I will take care of your father, too. We will bring him to the ranch, hire a nurse, whatever he needs. He is too sick to travel. The doctor says moving him could kill him. And even if we could move him, I have given my word. The arrangements are made." Douglas has already paid for the wedding, sent gifts. Breaking the engagement now would shame my father and destroy what little reputation I have. I would be known as the woman who jilted a wealthy man for a cattle rancher. No one would respect that. My father would die in disgrace. Zachary wanted to argue that none of that mattered, but he could see the truth in her eyes. In this world, in this time, a woman's reputation was everything. Breaking an engagement was a serious matter, especially to a man of Douglas Hartwell's standing. It would reflect poorly on her father and on Tessa herself, and if her father was truly too sick to move, Zachary could not ask her to abandon him in his final days. So that is it then. Zachary's voice was hollow. You marry a man you do not love and I go back to my ranch alone. What choice do I have? Tessa's voice rose, frustration and grief pouring out. Tell me, Zachary, what choice do I have that does not hurt someone I love? If I go with you, my father dies alone and disgraced. If I marry Douglas, I betray my own heart. There is no good answer. There is no choice that does not break something. They stood there in the fading light, the garden around them dying back for winter, the mountains going purple in the distance. Zachary felt something hardening inside him, a determination settling into his bones. Then I will give you another choice, he said. I will ride to Virginia City and speak to Douglas Hartwell myself, man to man. I will explain the situation and ask him to release you from the engagement. Tessa's eyes widened. Zachary, no. Virginia City is 3 days' ride from here. The wedding is in 2 weeks, and Douglas will never agree. Why would he? He has met me, decided I am suitable, made all the arrangements. He will not simply step aside because some rancher asks him to. Maybe not, but I have to try. I spent 18 months building a ranch so I could offer you a real life. I am not going to give up now without a fight. I will leave tomorrow morning at first light. I will ride the 3 days to Virginia City, speak to Douglas Hartwell, and convince him to release you from this engagement. And if he refuses, Zachary met her eyes steadily, then I will respect your decision. If you marry him, I will step aside. But I have to try, Tessa. I have to know I did everything possible. Can you understand that? Tessa wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of dirt across her cheekbone. You are a fool, Zachary Xander. Probably. But I am a fool who loves you. She closed the distance between them then, reaching up to touch his face with her dirty, trembling hand. I never stopped thinking about you. Every day you were gone, I wondered if you would come back. And now you are here and it is too late and I do not know whether to curse you or kiss you. Kiss me, Zachary said softly. Before I ride away again, kiss me so I have something to hold on to during those 3 days on the trail. Tessa rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, and then desperate as 18 months of separation and longing poured through both of them. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Come back to me, Tessa whispered. However this ends, come back and let me know. I promise. 3 days there, however long it takes to speak to Hartwell, and 3 days back. I will return before the wedding date. You have my word. Zachary left at dawn the next morning, his saddlebags packed with provisions, his best clothes rolled carefully in his bedroll. The ride to Virginia City was long and hard, taking him through rough country where the autumn weather had already turned cold. He pushed himself and his horse as fast as he dared, camping only when darkness made traveling dangerous, rising before the sun to continue. During those long hours in the saddle, Zachary had plenty of time to think. He had no plan, no strategy beyond throwing himself on Douglas Hartwell's mercy and hoping the man had enough decency to listen. It was a weak plan, he knew, but he had nothing else. He tried to imagine what Hartwell must be like. Wealthy, certainly. older than Tessa, probably. A businessman who saw marriage as a transaction, who had selected Tessa the way he might select a horse or a piece of property. The thought made Zachary's blood boil, but he forced himself to stay calm. Anger would not help his case. He needed to be respectful, reasonable, and honest. He needed to appeal to whatever shred of honor Douglas Hartwell possessed. Virginia City sprawled across the mountainside in a chaotic jumble of buildings, mineworks, and humanity. The Comstock lode had made this place boom, drawing thousands of people desperate for silver and the wealth it promised. The contrast with quiet Challies was stark. Here, everything was noise and motion, and the constant thunder of stamp mills crushing ore. Zachary found a stable for his horse and asked for directions to Douglas Hartwell's residence. The stable hand, a Mexican man with gray in his beard, looked at him curiously. "Hartwell. He has an office on C Street, big building. You cannot miss it. But if you are looking to do business with him, you had better have something valuable to offer. He is not known for his charity." "I am not here on business. I need to speak with him about a personal matter." The stable hand shrugged. "Then good luck to you, friend. You will need it." The office building was indeed impossible to miss. 3 stories of brick in a town where most structures were wood. Gold lettering on the door read, "Hartwell Mining Enterprises." Zachary took a deep breath, brushed dust from his clothes, and walked inside. A clerk sat at a desk in the outer office, a thin man with spectacles and ink-stained fingers. He looked up at Zachary with barely concealed disdain, taking in the dusty trail clothes and worn boots. "May I help you?" The tone suggested he doubted it. "I need to speak with Douglas Hartwell. It is a personal matter of some urgency. Mr. Hartwell does not see people without an appointment. If you wish to schedule a meeting, I can check his availability for next month." "Next month is too late. I need to speak with him today. It concerns his upcoming marriage." The clerk's eyebrows rose. "I see. And you are Zachary Xander. I have ridden 3 days from Challies, Idaho. I will wait as long as necessary, but I must speak with Mr. Hartwell today." Something in Zachary's tone must have convinced the clerk. This was not a conversation that would end quickly. He sighed and stood. "Wait here. I will inquire if Mr. Hartwell is willing to see you, though I make no promises." The clerk disappeared through a heavy oak door. Zachary waited, acutely aware of how out of place he looked in this polished office with its expensive furniture and thick carpets. He was a rancher, a working man with dirt under his nails and calluses on his hands. This world of mining wealth and business enterprises was foreign to him. The clerk returned after several long minutes. "Mr. Hartwell will give you 5 minutes. Follow me." Douglas Hartwell's private office was even more impressive than the outer room. Dark wood paneling, leather chairs, a massive desk covered in papers and ledgers. The man himself stood by the window, looking out at the controlled chaos of Virginia City. He was perhaps 40 years old, well dressed in a suit that probably cost more than Zachary's entire wardrobe, with graying temples and the kind of confidence that came from wealth and power. He turned as Zachary entered, his expression coolly curious. "Mr. Xander, is it? My clerk says you have ridden 3 days to speak with me about my upcoming marriage. I confess you have piqued my curiosity. Please explain yourself." Zachary had rehearsed several speeches during the ride, but standing here in front of this polished, powerful man, all his prepared words fled. He decided on simple honesty. "I am in love with Tessa Fairmont. I have been for years. I left Challies 18 months ago to build a ranch so I could offer her a proper home. I did not know about the engagement until I returned. I am here to ask you, respectfully, to release her from the arrangement." Douglas Hartwell's expression did not change. He walked to his desk, sat down, and steepled his fingers. That was admirably direct. I appreciate directness in business. However, marriage is also business, Mr. Xander, and I have already invested considerable resources in this arrangement. Why should I abandon those plans because a cowboy arrives with romantic notions? Because Tessa does not love you. She is marrying you out of desperation, because her father is dying and she has no other options. That is not the foundation for a good marriage. Love is vastly overrated, Hartwell said calmly. Compatibility, respect, shared interests, those matter far more. I have met Miss Fairmont twice, as I am sure you know. I found her intelligent, well-mannered, and attractive. She will make a suitable wife. Whether she loves me now is irrelevant. Affection can grow over time, or it cannot. You would keep her in a loveless marriage when she cares for someone else. I would provide her with security, comfort, and social position. Can you offer her the same, Mr. Xander? What exactly do you have to give her? The question was pointed, designed to highlight the gulf between them. Zachary straightened his shoulders. I have a ranch, 300 acres with good water and grazing, a solid house, a growing herd. I cannot offer her silver mines or fancy offices, but I can offer her honest work and a life built on something real. How many head of cattle? 43 at last count. Hartwell's lips curved in something that was not quite a smile. 43 cattle and 300 acres. Mr. Xander, I spend more on wine in a year than your entire ranch is worth. Miss Fairmont deserves better than a hardscrabble existence on a marginal cattle operation. Tessa deserves to choose her own life. She deserves to marry someone who loves her, not someone who sees her as a suitable acquisition. Now Hartwell's expression hardened. You presume a great deal. What makes you think Miss Fairmont wants to be rescued? Have you considered that perhaps she is content with the arrangement? That she prefers security to uncertainty? I know she is doing what she believes she must to care for her father. That is not the same as choosing freely. Life rarely offers us the luxury of choosing freely, Mr. Xander. We all operate within constraints. Miss Fairmont understands this. She has made her choice, and it is not you. Hartwell stood, signaling the conversation was over. I appreciate your candor, and I understand your feelings are engaged. However, the matter is settled. The wedding will proceed as planned. I suggest you return to your ranch and move forward with your life. Zachary felt desperation rising. I am asking you as one man to another. If you care about Tessa at all, give her this choice. Let her decide freely, without the pressure of circumstances. And how do you propose to remove those circumstances? Her father is dying. His medical care is expensive. Someone must pay those bills. Can you? The question hit Zachary like a punch. He had money, yes, enough to run the ranch and live modestly. But medical care for a dying man, potentially for months, that could drain his resources quickly. Hartwell saw the hesitation and pressed his advantage. I have already made arrangements to pay all of Samuel Fairmont's medical expenses. I have hired the best doctors available. If, as you say, Miss Fairmont is marrying me out of desperation, I have removed that desperation. Her father will receive excellent care regardless of whether the wedding proceeds. I informed Miss Fairmont of this in my last letter. If she still intends to marry me knowing her father is provided for, then clearly her choice is not purely mercenary. Perhaps you should consider that she simply does not return your feelings as strongly as you imagine. The words were designed to wound, and they succeeded. Zachary felt doubt creeping in. Had Tessa known her father's care was already secured? If so, why had she not mentioned it? Was Hartwell right? Did she actually prefer the security and status he offered? Zachary shook his head, clearing away the doubts. He remembered the kiss in the garden, the tears on Tessa's face, the way she had said she did not know whether to curse him or kiss him. Those were not the reactions of a woman indifferent to his feelings. "I do not believe you," Zachary said quietly. "I think you are a man used to getting what you want, and you have decided you want Tessa. But she is not property to be acquired. She is a person with her own heart and mind. And I think, deep down, you know this is wrong. You know she does not love you." For a moment, something flickered in Hartwell's eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps, or recognition. Then it was gone, replaced by cold resolve. "This conversation is over. I have indulged your romantic gesture long enough. Please leave, Mr. Xander. If you attempt to contact me again or disrupt the wedding in any way, I will have you arrested for harassment. Do not test me on this." Zachary knew he had lost. There was nothing more to say, no argument that would move this man. He had ridden 3 days and laid bare his heart, and it had accomplished nothing. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "I hope you are prepared for a wife who will spend the rest of her life wishing she was somewhere else. Wealth cannot buy love, Mr. Hartwell. You will learn that the hard way." He walked out before Hartwell could respond, through the outer office where the clerk pretended to be absorbed in paperwork, and out into the noise and chaos of Virginia City. The confrontation had taken less than 30 minutes. 3 days of hard riding for 30 minutes of failure. Zachary found a saloon and ordered whiskey, needing something to dull the sharp edges of his defeat. The place was crowded with miners and gamblers, the air thick with smoke and loud voices. He sat alone at a corner table, nursing his drink and trying to figure out what to do next. He had promised Tessa he would return and tell her the outcome. That meant another 3 days of riding back to Challies to deliver the news that he had failed, that Hartwell would not release her from the engagement. Then Tessa would marry a man she did not love, and Zachary would return to his ranch alone, and that would be the end of it. Unless. The thought crept in slowly, pushing aside the whiskey fog. What if Hartwell was lying about securing her father's care? What if that was just a manipulation, a way to make Zachary doubt Tessa's feelings? And even if it was true, even if Hartwell had paid for the medical bills, that did not necessarily mean Tessa knew she had a real choice. She might still believe she was obligated to go through with the wedding. The only way to know for certain was to talk to Tessa again. Not after another 3-day ride back to Challies, but now. If he rode hard, he could potentially make it back in 2.5 days. That would give them a few days before the wedding to make a real plan, to figure out a way forward that did not involve Zachary simply giving up. He stood, leaving coins on the table, and headed for the stable. The stable hand looked surprised to see him back so soon. That was quick business. "It did not go as I hoped. I need to head back to Idaho. Is my horse ready to ride?" The man frowned. "You just got here. That animal needs rest." "You both do. Push too hard and you will end up with a lame horse or worse." Zachary knew the advice was sound, but every hour he delayed was another hour closer to Tessa marrying Douglas Hartwell. "I will rest tonight, leave at first light tomorrow. That will have to be enough." He found a boarding house and paid for a room, though sleep eluded him for most of the night. His mind kept turning over the conversation with Hartwell, analyzing every word, looking for weaknesses he had missed. The man was arrogant, certainly, but he was also intelligent and unmoved by emotional appeals. Zachary had come to Virginia City hoping to appeal to Hartwell's better nature, only to discover the man apparently did not have one. The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Zachary was back in the saddle and heading northeast toward Challies. The journey back felt longer than the journey there, perhaps because he was riding toward uncertainty rather than purpose. He camped rough, eating jerky and hardtack, pushing his horse as hard as he dared while still heeding the stable hand's warning. On the evening of the second day, as he was setting up camp in a small canyon, he heard the sound of approaching riders. Zachary's hand went to the rifle in his saddle scabbard, a reflexive caution born of traveling alone through rough country. Two men emerged from the gathering darkness, both mounted, both armed. "Evening, friend," one of them called out. He was a big man with a thick beard and the hard look of someone who lived on the margins. "You are traveling alone." "I am, just passing through, heading to Idaho." "Idaho? Long way. You carrying anything valuable? Money, maybe?" Zachary's hand tightened on the rifle. "Nothing worth bothering with. I am just a rancher heading home." The second man, younger and leaner, circled around to Zachary's left, creating a crossfire position. "Let us be the judge of what is worth bothering with. Step away from that horse, nice and slow." Zachary's mind raced. He was outnumbered and outflanked. If this turned into a shooting situation, his odds were poor. But he also knew that showing weakness invited violence. He needed to project confidence, make these men think twice about whether he was worth the trouble. "I do not want any problems," Zachary said evenly, not moving toward or away from his horse. "But I am not handing over my belongings without a fight. You should know that before this goes any further." The big man laughed. "Listen to him, Charlie. He thinks he can take us both." "I think I can take one of you for certain," Zachary said, looking directly at the big man. "Which means even if your friend kills me, you will still be dead. Is whatever I have worth dying for?" The standoff stretched out, tense and silent except for the shifting of horses. Then a new voice called from the darkness behind Zachary. "How about you boys move along and save everyone some trouble?" All three men turned toward the voice. A third rider emerged into the firelight, this one older, with a U.S. Marshal's badge catching the light. He held a shotgun casually but with clear competence. "Marshal," the big man said, his tone changing. "We were just talking to this fellow, making sure he was not lost." "That's so. Looked to me like you were setting up to rob him. Now I am going to give you two a choice. You can ride out of here right now, or I can arrest you both for attempted robbery." "What will it be?" The two would-be robbers exchanged glances. The younger one looked ready to argue, but the big man shook his head. "We were just leaving anyway. No need for trouble." They rode off into the darkness at a pace that suggested they wanted distance quickly. The marshal watched them go, then turned to Zachary. "You handled that well. A lot of folks would have panicked. Thank you for the assistance. I appreciate the timing." The marshal dismounted and extended a hand. "Name is Thomas Riggs. I have been tracking those two for the better part of a week. They have been robbing travelers along this route. You made good bait, though I was not planning to use you that way. Just worked out." "Zachary Xander." "I am glad it worked out too. Can I offer you coffee?" "It is the least I can do." They sat by the fire while coffee boiled, and Marshal Riggs proved to be good company. He was perhaps 50, weathered by years of hard work, with the kind of competence that came from surviving in difficult circumstances. "You said you are heading to Idaho. Where about?" "Challies. Small town east of here. I have a ranch there." "Long way to travel, must be important." Zachary hesitated, then found himself telling the whole story. Maybe it was the adrenaline from the near robbery, or maybe he just needed to talk to someone, but he laid it all out. Tessa, the engagement, the failed meeting with Hartwell, the desperate ride back to try to change her mind before the wedding. Marshal Riggs listened without interrupting, his weathered face thoughtful in the firelight. When Zachary finished, the older man poured more coffee and took a long sip. "You are in a hard position," Riggs said finally, "but I will tell you something I have learned in 30 years of law work. The right thing and the legal thing are not always the same. Legally, that woman made an agreement to marry Hartwell. Breaking it has consequences. But morally, if she is being pushed into a marriage she does not want, that is wrong too. The question is, what are you willing to risk to make it right? What do you mean? I mean, you rode 3 days to talk to Hartwell. Now you are riding 3 days back to talk to her. All that riding, all that talking, but at the end of the day, she still has to make a choice. And whatever she chooses, you have to be ready to live with it. If she chooses you, really chooses you, are you prepared to deal with the fallout? Angry, powerful men, damaged reputations, financial consequences. I would handle whatever came. I love her. That is enough. Love is necessary, son, but it is not sufficient. You also need practical planning. If she says yes, if she agrees to break the engagement and come with you, what is your plan? How do you get her safely away? How do you handle her dying father? How do you protect her from Hartwell if he decides to cause problems? Zachary stared into the fire, realizing he had been so focused on the emotional appeal that he had not thought through the practical details. I do not know. I have been operating on hope and determination. Then think it through now. You have another day of riding to work out the details. Because if you show up in Challies without a real plan, you are not offering her a choice. You are offering her a leap into chaos, and a woman in her position cannot afford chaos. They talked late into the night, and Marshal Riggs helped Zachary think through the practicalities. How to arrange for a doctor to care for Samuel Fairmont if moving him was not possible. How to legally break the engagement in a way that minimized the social consequences. How to protect Tessa's reputation and safety if Hartwell became vindictive. By the time Zachary finally slept, he had the outline of a real plan. It was not perfect and it had risks, but it was better than the vague hope he had been carrying. In the morning, Marshal Riggs rode with him for a few hours before their paths diverged. "Good luck, son," Riggs said as they parted ways. "I hope it works out for you. And if that woman has half the sense she seems to, she will choose love over money every time." Zachary arrived in Challies late on the 3rd day, exhausted and trail-worn but driven by urgency. He rode straight to the Fairmont house, where lamplight glowed in the windows against the gathering darkness. Tessa must have heard the horse because she appeared on the porch before he even dismounted. "Zachary." His name was barely a whisper. "You came back." He climbed down from the saddle, his legs stiff from days of riding. "I promised I would. I need to talk to you. Is your father resting? He sleeps most of the time now. Come inside." The house was exactly as Zachary remembered, small and worn but clean, the furniture old but well-maintained. Tessa led him to the kitchen, where she put a kettle on for tea, her movements automatic, her hands shaking slightly. "Tell me what happened in Virginia City," she said once they were seated at the small table. "Did you speak to Douglas?" "I did. He refused to release you from the engagement. He said marriage is business, that love does not matter, that he can provide you with more than I ever could." Zachary reached across the table and took her hand. "But I do not think that is the whole story. He also said he has already paid your father's medical expenses, arranged for the best doctors. Did you know about that?" Tessa nodded slowly. "He wrote to me 3 weeks ago. The letter came the same day as the wedding confirmation. He said he had made arrangements for father's care, that I should not worry about the costs." "Then why did you tell me you were marrying him out of desperation? If the medical bills are handled, you have a choice." Her eyes filled with tears. "Do I? Even if Douglas has paid the bills, breaking the engagement would humiliate him publicly. He is a powerful man, Zachary. He could make life very difficult for us. And father, he is so set on this marriage, it gives him peace to think I will be cared for." If I break the engagement now, the shock might kill him. I am trapped between hurting everyone I care about no matter what I choose." Zachary squeezed her hand. "I spoke to a U.S. Marshal on the road back. He helped me think through the details. We can do this, Tessa, but we have to be smart about it. First, we need to tell your father the truth. He deserves to know how you really feel and that you have another option. Let him make his decision based on truth, not assumptions. He is so weak. I do not want to upset him." "Would it upset him more to know you are unhappy or to believe you are content in a loveless marriage? Give him credit, Tessa. Tell him the truth and let him respond. He might surprise you." They sat in silence for a moment, the kettle whistling softly on the stove. Then Tessa stood and poured the tea, her movements deliberate, buying time to think. "What about Douglas?" she asked finally. "Even if father gives his blessing, breaking the engagement will have consequences. Douglas is not a man who accepts being publicly rejected. He could sue for breach of promise. He could spread rumors that damage my reputation. He could. But I think his pride would prevent it. Men like Douglas Hartwell do not want the world knowing a woman chose a poor rancher over them. And legally, if he has been paying your father's bills, we can make the case that the financial obligation has been met. We would return any gifts he sent. We would handle it as respectfully as possible. It would not be easy, but it would be honest." Tessa sat back down, cradling her teacup in both hands. "You have thought this through." "I had 3 days on horseback with nothing else to do. Tessa, I am not asking you to run away with me tonight. I am asking you to make a real choice based on what you actually want, not what you think you should do. Talk to your father. Think about what kind of life you want. If you decide you truly prefer Douglas and the security he offers, I will respect that and leave you in peace. But if you want a different life, a life with me, then we can make it work. It will not be easy, we will face challenges, but we will face them together." She looked at him across the table, this man who had ridden 6 days and bared his heart, who had thought through the practicalities, and was offering her a real choice instead of just romantic words. In that moment, Tessa felt something shift inside her. The resignation that had been weighing her down for months began to lift, replaced by something that felt like hope. "I need to talk to father," she said. "Will you wait as long as you need?" Tessa went to her father's room where Samuel Fairmont lay propped against pillows, his breathing labored but steady. His eyes opened when she entered, and he managed a weak smile. "Tessa, what is wrong? You look troubled." She pulled a chair close to the bed and took his thin hand. "Father, I need to talk to you about the wedding, about Douglas, about everything. Has something happened? Is there a problem with the arrangements? The problem is that I do not love him. I am grateful for his generosity with your medical care, truly. But I do not love him, Father. I am marrying him because I thought I had no choice, because I wanted you to have peace. But that is not enough foundation for a marriage." Samuel's eyes sharpened despite his weakness. "You are thinking of breaking the engagement. Zachary Xander has returned. He built a ranch while he was away. He came here to ask me to marry him, to offer me a real home. I love him, Father. I have loved him for years. But I will not choose him if it means you die without peace or in disgrace. I need to know what you truly want for me." Her father was quiet for a long moment, his breathing the only sound. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but clear. "I was 18 when I met your mother. My family wanted me to marry the daughter of a wealthy merchant. Good business sense, they said. But I loved your mother, the blacksmith's daughter with no dowry and no prospects. My family disowned me when I married her anyway. We had nothing, Tessa, nothing but each other, and they were the happiest years of my life." Tears streamed down Tessa's face. "You never told me that. Because when your mother died, I forgot what it felt like. The grief was so sharp, I wondered if loving her had been worth the pain. When Douglas Hartwell appeared with his money and his respectable offer, I saw security. I saw a way to protect you from the kind of grief I felt. But I was wrong. Security without love is not protection. It is a different kind of prison. So you would not be ashamed if I broke the engagement, if I chose Zachary instead. Samuel Fairmont squeezed his daughter's hand with what little strength he had. I would be proud. Proud that you had the courage to choose love. Your mother would be proud too. Marry Zachary, Tessa. Marry him and be happy. That is all I have ever really wanted for you. Tessa leaned forward and kissed her father's forehead, her tears falling onto his weathered face. Thank you, Father, thank you. She returned to the kitchen where Zachary was waiting, standing now, too anxious to sit. When he saw her face, he knew the answer before she spoke. He gave us his blessing, Tessa said. He wants me to choose love. Zachary crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her as if he would never let go. Then choose me, choose us, choose the life we can build together. I choose you, Tessa whispered against his chest. I choose you, Zachary, I always have. They stood there in the warm kitchen, holding each other, and for the first time in months, Tessa felt like she could breathe. But the feeling was short-lived. Reality pressed back in, bringing all the complications they still had to navigate. We need to write to Douglas immediately, Tessa said, pulling back slightly. We need to tell him the engagement is broken and why. It is the right thing to do, and it gives us the best chance of avoiding legal complications. Zachary nodded. You are right. We should write tonight, send it express delivery tomorrow. The wedding is in 9 days. He needs to know as soon as possible. They composed the letter together, working through multiple drafts to get the tone right. It needed to be respectful but firm, apologetic for any inconvenience but clear about Tessa's decision. In the final version, Tessa thanked Douglas for his generosity toward her father's care, but explained that she could not in good conscience marry him when her heart belonged to another. She expressed hope that he would find a woman who could return his regard properly and assured him that all wedding gifts would be returned. You think he will accept this? Tessa asked as she sealed the envelope. Honestly, I do not know, but we are giving him the respect of honesty. What he does with that is his choice. The next morning, Zachary took the letter to the post office in town and paid for the fastest delivery. Word would spread quickly in a small town like Challies, he knew. Already people were looking at him curiously, wondering why he was back and what his presence meant. Within days, everyone would know that Tessa Fairmont had broken her engagement to the wealthy Douglas Hartwell in favor of a local rancher. As predicted, the news spread like wildfire. Some people were scandalized, clucking their tongues about Tessa throwing away a good match. Others were more sympathetic, remembering that Zachary and Tessa had been close before he left. Mrs. Peterson from the general store was firmly in Tessa's corner, declaring loudly that love should always triumph over money. The response from Douglas Hartwell arrived 5 days later, much faster than expected. The letter was terse and cold. He acknowledged receipt of Tessa's letter breaking the engagement. He stated that while he was disappointed by her decision, he would not pursue legal action on the condition that all wedding arrangements be canceled and all gifts returned within 1 week. He ended by noting that he hoped Tessa would not come to regret her choice, a line that felt more like a threat than a wish. He is letting us go, Tessa said, reading the letter for the 3rd time. I cannot believe it. I thought he would fight. His pride is wounded, Zachary said. But like I thought, he does not want the world knowing the details. Better to let you go quietly than make a spectacle. They spent the next 2 days canceling the wedding arrangements and returning gifts. It was awkward and sometimes humiliating, facing merchants and friends who had been expecting a grand wedding. But Tessa held her head high, thanking people for their understanding and refusing to engage with gossip or speculation. Through it all, Samuel Fairmont's condition remained stable. The doctor Douglas had hired continued to care for him, professional enough not to let the broken engagement affect his work. Samuel seemed more at peace than he had in months, often asking Zachary to sit with him and tell him about the ranch. 300 acres, Samuel said one afternoon, his voice weak but interested. That is good land, room to grow. Yes, sir. The house is solid 4 rooms, I built it myself. And there is good water, a creek that runs year-round. The herd is small now, but it will grow. In a few years, we will have a proper operation. You will take care of my daughter. It was not a question, but Zachary answered anyway. With my life, sir, I promise you that. Samuel nodded, satisfied. Then I can rest easy. 2 weeks after Tessa broke the engagement, she and Zachary were married in a quiet ceremony at the church in Challies. Only a handful of people attended. Mrs. Peterson was there, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. A few of Zachary's friends from before he left. The doctor who had been caring for Samuel. And Samuel himself, brought from his sick in a borrowed wagon, wrapped in blankets against the October chill. Tessa wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit. Zachary wore his best suit, brushed clean of trail dust. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When the preacher asked if they took each other for better or worse, richer or poorer, their voices rang clear and certain. After the ceremony, there was a small gathering at the Fairmont house. Samuel was settled back in his bed, but he could hear the voices and laughter from the kitchen, and it made him smile. Late in the afternoon, he called Tessa to his bedside. I want you to know, he said, taking her hand, that today has been a good day. Seeing you marry for love, knowing you will be happy, that is worth everything. Do not grieve too much when I am gone. I will be with your mother and you will have Zachary. That is how it should be. Do not talk like that, father. You will be here for a long time yet. But they both knew it was not true. Samuel Fairmont died peacefully 3 days later in his sleep, with Tessa and Zachary sitting vigil beside him. His last words had been about his wife, saying he could see her waiting for him. They buried Samuel in the Challies cemetery on a cold November morning. The turnout was larger than expected. For all his recent troubles, Samuel had been a well-liked man in his time. People came to pay respects and offer condolences. Even some who had criticized Tessa for breaking the engagement showed up, perhaps feeling guilty now that her father was gone. After the funeral, Tessa and Zachary spent a week settling Samuel's affairs. The house would be sold to cover remaining debts. His few possessions were divided among friends and donated to the church. It was melancholy work, dismantling a life but necessary. Are you ready to see the ranch? Zachary asked one evening as they finished packing the last of Tessa's belongings. Ready to start our new life? Tessa looked around the empty house where she had grown up, feeling the weight of memory and loss. Then she looked at Zachary, at the man who had ridden 6 days and risked everything for her, and she felt the future opening up like a sunrise. I am ready. Let us go home. The journey to the ranch took 2 days at an easy pace. Zachary had borrowed a wagon for Tessa's belongings and a gentle mare for her to ride. They traveled through country that grew progressively wilder, leaving behind the settled areas around Challies for open rangeland dotted with sagebrush and pine. Zachary pointed out landmarks as they rode. The creek, where he got water. The high pasture where he planned to move the cattle for summer grazing. The stand of timber he would harvest for expansion projects. He talked about his plans for the future, his voice full of enthusiasm and hope, and Tessa found herself catching his excitement. They arrived at the ranch on a clear afternoon, sunlight making the grass look gold. The house was exactly as Zachary had described it, a solid timber structure with a stone chimney and a covered porch. It was not large or fancy, but it looked like a home. Beside it was a barn in good repair, and beyond that, fenced pastures where cattle grazed peacefully. "It is not much yet," Zachary said, suddenly nervous. "But it is a start. We will make it better together." Tessa dismounted and walked slowly toward the house, taking it all in. The well with its neat stone rim. The vegetable garden, overgrown now but salvageable. The view of mountains in the distance. This was hers now. Not because her father had arranged it or because she had been forced into it, but because she had chosen it, because she had chosen love. "It is perfect," she said, turning to Zachary with tears in her eyes. "It is absolutely perfect." That first night in their home, they lay in bed listening to the wind in the pines and the distant sound of cattle. Zachary held Tessa close, marveling at the fact that she was really here, that they had actually made it through all the obstacles to this moment. "You regret it?" he asked softly. "Giving up the life you could have had with Douglas Hartwell, the money, the status?" Tessa turned in his arms to face him. "Not for a single second. This is what I want, Zachary. You are what I want. Everything else is just details." They settled into the rhythms of ranch life with surprising ease. Tessa had grown up helping her father and was no stranger to hard work. She took over the vegetable garden, reviving it and planning for spring planting. She learned to cook on the wood stove, to preserve food, to make soap and candles. Zachary taught her to ride better, to handle cattle, to shoot in case she ever needed to defend the ranch while he was out working. The winter was hard, as first winters often are. Snow came early and deep, trapping them at the ranch for days at a time. 2 calves were lost to cold despite their best efforts. A section of fence collapsed under snow weight and had to be rebuilt in freezing temperatures. Money was tight. Every penny counted and stretched, but there were good moments too. Evenings by the fire, reading aloud from the few books they owned, making love under quilts while wind howled outside. The first Christmas together, simple and quiet, where they exchanged small gifts they had made for each other. Zachary carved Tessa a wooden box for her mother's jewelry. Tessa sewed him a warm shirt from fabric she had carefully hoarded. In early spring, Tessa realized she was pregnant. The knowledge filled her with a mixture of joy and terror. They were far from doctors, and she knew the dangers of childbirth all too well. Her own mother had died bringing a child into the world, but Zachary was thrilled and immediately became protective, insisting she rest more, do less heavy work. "I am pregnant, not fragile," Tessa protested. "Women have been having babies while working ranches since ranches existed. Not my wife, not carrying my child, you will be careful." They argued about it good-naturedly, finding a compromise where Tessa continued working but avoided the heaviest tasks. As her belly grew through the summer, Zachary found himself amazed by the changes, by the visible proof that they were creating a family together. The baby came on a September evening, almost exactly a year after Zachary had returned to Challies and changed both their lives. Tessa's labor was long and difficult, attended by a midwife they had hired from the nearest settlement. Zachary paced outside, terrified, praying to any god who would listen that both mother and child would survive. When the baby's cry finally pierced the night, Zachary rushed inside. The midwife met him with a tired smile. "You have a son, strong and healthy. Your wife is exhausted but well." "You are a lucky man, Mr. Xander." Zachary approached the bed where Tessa lay, pale but smiling, holding a red-faced, squalling infant. She had never looked more beautiful to him. "A boy," she said softly. "We have a son, Zachary." He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger. "He is perfect. You are perfect. I love you so much." They named him Samuel after Tessa's father. Little Sam grew strong and healthy, thriving on ranch life. By his first birthday, he was toddling around the yard, chasing chickens and laughing at the cattle. Watching him grow, Zachary and Tessa felt their family becoming complete in ways they had never imagined. The ranch prospered slowly but steadily. Each year the herd grew. Each year they made improvements. A second bedroom was added to the house when Tessa became pregnant again, 2 years after Sam was born. Their daughter, named Emma after Zachary's mother, arrived in the spring of 1880, healthy and loud and perfect. Word reached them occasionally from the wider world. Virginia City's boom was ending as the silver played out. Douglas Hartwell, they heard, had married a woman from San Francisco and moved to California to pursue other business interests. Tessa felt nothing but mild relief at the news. That part of her life felt like it had happened to someone else in another lifetime. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Zachary and Tessa took an evening to themselves while a neighbor watched the children. They rode out to a high meadow on the ranch where wildflowers bloomed and the view stretched for miles. "You remember the day I came back?" Zachary asked, sitting with Tessa leaning against him. "When you were in the garden and I told you I had built the ranch for you. I remember thinking you were either very brave or very foolish, maybe both, definitely both, but I could not let you go without fighting for you. Best decision I ever made." Tessa turned to kiss him. "Best decision we both made, choosing each other, choosing this life." They watched the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple, counting their blessings. 2 healthy children, a thriving ranch, health and strength and love that had only deepened with time and trials. They had faced hard winters and crop failures and sick cattle, and all the challenges that came with carving a life from rough country. But they had faced it together, and that had made all the difference. By the time their 10th anniversary arrived in 1886, the ranch had become one of the more successful operations in the area. The herd numbered over 300 head. They had hired 2 ranch hands to help with the work. The house had been expanded to 6 rooms, comfortable and well-furnished. Sam was 9 years old, already showing signs of becoming a skilled horseman. Emma was 7, bright and fearless, equally at home helping her mother in the garden or following her father around the ranch. Tessa had also become pregnant twice more over the years, though one ended in heartbreaking miscarriage and the other in a stillbirth that nearly broke them both. Those losses had taught them to treasure what they had even more deeply. Sam and Emma were miracles, and they treated them as such. Zachary was 34 now, weathered by sun and work, but strong and capable. Tessa was 31, her beauty matured into something deeper than youthful prettiness. They had grown together, learning each other completely, building a partnership that was equal parts romance and practical teamwork. Sometimes, usually late at night when the children were asleep, they would talk about the chain of events that had brought them here. If Zachary had not received his grandfather's inheritance, if he had not left to build the ranch, if Tessa's father had not gotten sick, if Douglas Hartwell had not come to Challies, if Zachary had not ridden back in time, any one of those things going differently and they might never have ended up together. "I do not believe in fate," Tessa said during one of these conversations, "but I believe in choices. You chose to come back for me. I chose you over security. Those choices mattered. They made this life possible. No regrets, not a single one. You," Zachary pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair. "Only that I did not tell you I loved you sooner. That I wasted time being too proud or too scared to speak up. But we got here eventually. That is what matters." In the summer of 1887, Tessa discovered she was pregnant again. This time, both she and Zachary approached it with cautious optimism, having learned not to take anything for granted. The pregnancy progressed well, and in March of 1888, Tessa delivered another healthy boy. They named him Jacob, and he proved to be the easiest of their babies, calm and content from the start. With 3 children now, the house felt full and alive in ways that delighted them both. Sam, nearly 11, took his role as big brother seriously, always watching out for Emma and Jacob. Emma was a whirlwind of energy and questions, constantly exploring and getting into mischief. Jacob was the peaceful one, happy to sit and observe the chaos around him with solemn eyes. The ranch continued to grow. Zachary had proven himself a shrewd businessman as well as a skilled rancher. He had made strategic purchases of additional land when opportunities arose, expanding their holdings to over 800 acres. The cattle operation was profitable, and he had diversified into horses as well, breeding and training cow ponies that were in high demand. Tessa had developed her own enterprises. Her garden had expanded into a serious vegetable operation that supplied not just their family, but several neighbors and the general store in the nearest town. She had also become known for her preserves and baked goods, which she sold whenever possible to add to their income. They worked as a team in everything, making decisions together, supporting each other through challenges, celebrating successes together. The love that had driven Zachary to ride 3 days and fight for her had not diminished over the years. If anything, it had grown stronger, tempered by shared experience and deepened by genuine partnership. On a fall evening in 1890, Zachary came in from working cattle to find Tessa on the porch, watching the sunset with Jacob on her lap and a letter in her hand. Something about her expression made him pause. "What is it? Bad news?" Tessa looked up, her expression complicated. "Not bad exactly, just unexpected. It is from Douglas Hartwell." Zachary felt a jolt of surprise. They had not heard anything about or from Douglas in years. "What does he want?" "He is dying. Some kind of growth in his stomach, the doctors say. He wrote to make peace, he says. To tell me that he has thought often about what happened and has come to believe I made the right choice. He says his marriage was comfortable but loveless, and watching it made him understand what I was trying to avoid. He wanted me to know that he holds no grudges and wishes us well." Zachary sat down beside her, processing this. "That is generous of him." "It is sad," Tessa said softly. "He had all that money, all that success, and in the end he realizes it did not make him happy. I feel sorry for him." "Will you write back?" "I think so. Just a brief note thanking him for the letter and wishing him peace. It feels like the right thing to do. Close that chapter completely." Tessa wrote the letter that evening, a simple message of forgiveness and good wishes. When she sealed it, she felt a sense of closure, a final ending to a story that had begun 14 years ago in very different circumstances. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows. Zachary's father died in 1892, making a deathbed reconciliation with the son he had largely ignored. Tessa's childhood home in Challies was torn down to make way for a new bank building, erasing another physical connection to her past. Sam grew into a tall, capable young man who worked the ranch alongside his father. Emma showed a talent for teaching and talked about becoming a schoolteacher. Jacob was quiet and thoughtful, more interested in books than cattle, and they encouraged his scholarly bent. In 1895, after years of trying and several losses, Tessa gave birth one last time at age 40. Another daughter, named Lily, who would be their final child. The birth was difficult, and the doctor warned that more pregnancies would be dangerous. Tessa and Zachary accepted this, grateful for the 4 healthy children they had, and the life they had built together. By the turn of the century, the ranch had become a true family operation. Sam, now 21, was essentially running the cattle side of the business. Emma had indeed become a teacher, working in the local school but still living at home. Jacob, at 13, helped his mother with the garden and spent his free time reading everything he could get his hands on. Lily, at 5, was the baby of the family and thoroughly spoiled by all her older siblings. Zachary and Tessa were in their 40s now, entering middle age but still healthy and active. The ranch was successful enough that they lived comfortably, not wealthy by Douglas Hartwell's standards but secure and content. They had achieved what they had set out to build all those years ago, a life based on love and honest work. One evening, sitting on their porch and watching their grandchildren play, Tessa reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Sam had married a local girl and already had 2 children of his own. Emma was courting a young surveyor who seemed promising. The ranch would continue passed to the next generation, built on the foundation she and Zachary had laid. "You ever think about what your life would have been like if you had married Douglas?" Zachary asked, reading her thoughtful expression. "Sometimes. I imagine I would have lived in a fine house, worn expensive dresses, attended society functions. I probably would have been comfortable, maybe even content in a way, but I would not have been happy. Not really, because I would not have had this." She gestured at the scene before them, the ranch bustling with life and family. "I would not have had you, and that would have made all the difference." Zachary took her hand, the same gesture he had made 1,000 times over their years together. "I love you, Tessa. I have loved you since I was 15 years old, and I will love you until my last breath. Riding those 3 days to change your mind was the best thing I ever did. And choosing you over security was the best thing I ever did. We built something real here, Zachary. Something that will last beyond us." They sat together as the sun set over their land, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived. The house full of children and grandchildren, the prosperous ranch stretching to the horizon. The love that had started with a desperate 3-day ride and had grown into something solid and enduring. Years later, when both Zachary and Tessa were gone and their children were telling stories to their own grandchildren, the tale of how their grandparents got together became a family legend. The story of how Zachary rode 3 days to Virginia City to fight for Tessa's hand, and then 3 days back to give her a real choice. The story of how Tessa chose love over money, courage over security, and how that choice had shaped generations. But in those quiet evenings on the porch, just the 2 of them watching their legacy unfold, Zachary and Tessa knew the real story. It was not about a dramatic 3-day ride or a broken engagement or choosing between 2 different futures. It was about 2 people who loved each other enough to fight for that love, to work for it, to build something lasting from it. It was about partnership and trust, about facing hardship together and celebrating joy together, about creating a life that honored the choice they had made. The ranch they built still stood decades later, passed through generations of Xanders who knew the story of how it began. The land they worked with such dedication continued to produce and prosper. And the love story of Zachary and Tessa became the foundation upon which an entire family legacy was built. Proof that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ride 3 days to change someone's mind. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let them succeed. In the end, they had grown old together, exactly as they had hoped. Zachary lived to 73, still riding the ranch until the last year of his life. Tessa followed him 2 years later at 70. Surrounded by children and grandchildren who had all benefited from the brave choice she had made decades before. They were buried side by side in the family cemetery on a hill overlooking the ranch. Their headstones simple but inscribed with the dates of their marriage and the words, "They chose love." And that choice, made in the autumn of 1876 by a rancher who rode 3 days and a woman who was promised to another man, echoed forward through time, creating ripples of love and family and legacy that would never be forgotten.